At Thanksgiving, my aunt pointed to a plastic chair by the garage and said, "That's your spot. Real family sits inside." My cousins laughed while I ate alone in the cold. Then the caterer walked out with the $4,300 bill and handed it straight to me. I just smiled, pointed inside, and said, "Ask the real family." Then I left, and their cards started declining before dessert. I, 32M, got exiled to the garage at Thanksgiving. So I left them with a $4,300 bill they couldn't pay. I should have known something was wrong when my aunt told me to park in the back. The driveway was full of cars when I arrived at her house that Thursday morning. Expensive SUVs and sedans lined up like a luxury dealership. I'd driven 3 hours to be there, same as I did every year, carrying 2 pies I'd baked myself and a bottle of wine that cost more than I wanted to admit. My aunt had been texting me all week about how excited she was for the family gathering, how it wouldn't be the same without me, how I absolutely had to come. So I came. She met me at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She took the pies without commenting on them and set them on a side table in the hallway. Then she asked me to move my car because her neighbor was coming by later and needed the spot. I moved it. When I came back inside, I noticed my cousins clustered in the living room, whispering and glancing my way. They stopped talking when I walked in. The house smelled incredible. Roasted turkey and sage and butter and all those warm scents that are supposed to mean family and togetherness. The dining room table was set with her fine china, the kind she only brought out for special occasions. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier. Everything looked perfect. My aunt came out of the kitchen wiping her hands on a towel. She looked at me and then glanced toward the back door. She said it was such a nice day outside, wasn't it? Unseasonably warm for November. I agreed, not understanding where she was going with this. Then she said that since there were so many people this year, they'd set up some alternative seating arrangements. She walked to the back door and opened it, gesturing toward the garage. There was a white plastic chair sitting on the concrete, the kind you buy at hardware stores for $5. A paper plate and plastic utensils sat on an overturned crate next to it. She told me that was where I'd be eating. She said it so casually, like she was telling me where the bathroom was. Real family sits inside, she explained. This arrangement just made more sense given the space constraints. I stood there staring at that plastic chair. Behind me, I heard one of my cousins laugh. Then another one joined in. My aunt's daughter said something about hoping I didn't mind roughing it. More laughter. I asked my aunt if she was serious. She said of course she was serious, and I shouldn't make a big deal out of it. Family is family no matter where you sit, right? Then she turned and went back into the kitchen. The thing is, I'd been paying for these Thanksgiving dinners for 3 years. It started the year my uncle died. He'd handled all the finances, and after he passed, my aunt discovered he'd been living beyond their means. Way beyond. She called me crying, saying she didn't know how she'd manage. She couldn't afford the mortgage, couldn't afford anything. She might lose the house. I helped her then because that's what you do for family. I paid off some of her debts, helped her get back on her feet. She was grateful. She hugged me and cried and said she'd never forget it. That Thanksgiving, she mentioned that hosting was so expensive, especially with everything she'd been through. She didn't ask directly, but the implication was clear. I offered to cover the dinner. She accepted with relief. The next year, she didn't even hint. She just sent me the catering quote and asked if I could handle it. I could, so I did. This year, same thing. She'd forwarded me the invoice 2 weeks ago. $4,300 for a full Thanksgiving spread from an upscale catering company. Enough food for 20 people. I'd paid half up front. Nobody else knew this. My aunt certainly never told anyone. As far as the rest of the family was concerned, she was still the generous matriarch hosting everyone out of the goodness of her heart. I walked over to that plastic chair and sat down. The concrete was cold even through my jeans. It was not unseasonably warm. It was 45 degrees and windy. I could hear everything happening inside. The laughter, the conversation, the clinking of glasses. Through the window, I watched them all gathering around that beautiful table. My cousins. My aunt's new boyfriend I'd only met once. Some family friends who apparently qualified as more real than I did. Someone brought out a plate for me. Turkey and some sides, dumped onto a paper plate without ceremony. No cranberry sauce, even though I'd mentioned I loved it. The turkey was dry. I sat there eating alone in the cold, listening to the sounds of warmth and family coming from inside the house. My breath misted in front of me. I thought about all the times I'd been there for them. Not just the money, though there'd been plenty of that. The time I drove through the night to help my cousin move. The time I spent a week helping my aunt sort through my uncle's belongings because she couldn't face doing it alone. The birthday gifts. The Christmas presents. The phone calls where I listened to their problems. I thought about that a lot while I ate my dry turkey in the garage. I was almost finished when the back door opened. The catering manager stepped out, a woman in her 40s carrying a tablet and looking confused. She asked if I was the one who'd arranged the payment. I said I was. She said the final balance was due before they packed up, and she had the invoice ready. $2,150 remaining. She handed the tablet to me. I looked at it. Then I looked through the window at my aunt holding cord at the head of that table, laughing at something someone had said. I looked at my cousins, who hadn't bothered to check on me once. I thought about that plastic chair and those paper plates. I handed the tablet back. I told the catering manager she'd need to speak with the host about payment. The woman who lived here. I pointed through the window at my aunt. The manager looked confused. She said my aunt had told her I was handling everything. I said there must have been some miscommunication. Plans had changed. She should definitely speak with my aunt about the balance. I stood up, my legs stiff from sitting on that cold chair. I walked to where I'd parked my car in the back. I got in, started the engine, and drove away. My phone started ringing before I hit the highway. Update 1. I didn't answer the calls. There were 7 of them in the first hour. My aunt, mostly, but also 2 of my cousins. Then the texts started coming in. I was ruining Thanksgiving. How could I do this to family? Where was I going? I needed to come back right now. This was ridiculous. I was being incredibly immature. I stopped at a diner about an hour from my aunt's house and ordered coffee and pie. Real pie, not the ones I'd baked that no one would probably eat. While I sat there, my phone kept buzzing. I finally opened the messages. My aunt's first texts were angry. I was ungrateful. After everything she'd done for me. She couldn't believe I'd embarrass her like this in front of everyone. Then they shifted to desperate. The caterer wouldn't leave without payment. Her cards weren't working. There must be something wrong with them. Could I please just call her? Please. My cousin sent a message saying I was pathetic. All of this over a seating arrangement? Grow up. Another cousin, one I'd actually thought I was close with, sent something more measured. She said she didn't know what happened, but everyone was upset. The caterer was refusing to leave and threatening to take the food back. Couldn't I just sort this out? For the sake of family? I typed out a response and sent it to the group chat they'd apparently created to deal with this crisis. I told them I'd been happy to handle payment when I thought I was part of the family. But since real family sits inside, and I was apparently not real family, they should handle it themselves. I wished them a happy Thanksgiving. Then I muted the chat. The pie was excellent. I took my time eating it. When I finally checked my phone again, there were 43 new messages. The situation at the house had apparently escalated. The catering manager had started packing up the food. Not just the leftovers, all of it. The turkey, the sides, everything. My aunt had tried 3 different credit cards. All declined. Her boyfriend tried his. Also declined. They'd attempted to Venmo the catering company. The company didn't accept Venmo for amounts over $500. One cousin had offered to pay with a check. The caterer pointed out that she'd require a check for the full amount, not a partial payment, and it would need to clear before they released the food. No one there could cover $2,150 with a personal check without bouncing it. My aunt called the catering company's corporate office. They told her the terms were clear on the contract, full payment upon delivery. Her complaint would be noted, but their driver wasn't leaving without payment or the food. Those were the only 2 options. Someone had the bright idea to take up a collection. They managed to gather about $600 in cash from everyone present. The caterer thanked them politely and said she still needed the remaining $1,550. Around the time dessert was supposed to be served, my aunt called me from someone else's phone. I didn't recognize the number, so I answered. She was crying. She said I'd humiliated her. Everyone was still there, watching this disaster unfold. The caterer had taken everything. They'd ordered pizza, but it would take an hour to arrive. Her boyfriend was barely speaking to her. My cousins were furious. Some of the guests had just left. How could I do this to her? I asked her if she remembered where she'd asked me to sit. I asked her if she remembered what she'd said about real family. She said I was being ridiculous. It was just a seating arrangement. I was blowing this completely out of proportion. She'd apologize if that's what I wanted. Could I please just fix this? I told her I'd paid for 3 years of Thanksgiving dinners. I'd helped her when she was struggling. I'd been there for her and for this family over and over again. And she'd put me in the garage with a paper plate like I was something she was ashamed of. She said I was being too sensitive. I hung up. Update 2. I went home. I lived alone in an apartment that suddenly felt very quiet. I made myself a sandwich and watched television and tried not to think about what had happened. It didn't really work. My phone kept buzzing with new messages, but I didn't look at them. By evening, my social media was exploding. Apparently, one of the guests at Thanksgiving had found the whole thing entertaining enough to post about it. She'd framed it as a dramatic story about a family dinner gone wrong, leaving out most of the details, but making it clear there'd been a spectacular payment dispute. People were commenting and sharing. Some of my extended family who hadn't been there were messaging me asking what happened. I didn't respond to any of it. The next morning, my aunt's boyfriend called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. He told me I'd put him in a very awkward position. He'd been dating my aunt for 8 months, and this was his first major family event with them. Now he'd watched her get humiliated over a catering bill, and he was questioning what other financial issues she might have. He'd thought she owned her home outright. She'd told him she was financially stable. But clearly neither of those things were true if she couldn't cover a $2,000 bill. I didn't say anything. He asked if this was a pattern. Was my aunt normally this irresponsible with money? I told him that wasn't really my business to discuss. He should talk to her about it. He said he was trying to, but she kept saying it was all a misunderstanding, that I'd promised to pay and then bailed at the last minute, that this was entirely my fault. I asked him if he knew where I'd been sitting during Thanksgiving dinner. There was a long pause. He said he'd noticed I wasn't at the table, but he'd assumed I'd left early or was eating in the kitchen. I told him about the plastic chair. Another pause. Then he said he needed to think about some things. He thanked me for being honest and hung up. 2 days after Thanksgiving, my aunt sent me an email. Not a text, an actual email. It was long. She'd written it carefully, I could tell. She said she'd had time to reflect on what happened. She understood why I was hurt. The seating arrangement had been poorly thought out, and she could see now how it might have seemed hurtful. But I had to understand her position. The house was full. Some of her guests were very important to her. She'd been trying to manage a complicated social situation, and maybe she'd handled it wrong. She said I'd really hurt her by leaving her in that situation with the caterer. It had been humiliating. People were talking about it. Her relationship was under strain. Was that really what I wanted? To punish her like this over a misunderstanding? She asked if we could move past this. She offered to have me over for dinner, just the two of us, so we could talk it through. She didn't apologize for the plastic chair. She didn't apologize for calling me not real family. She apologized for the optics of the situation. I didn't respond. My cousin, the one who'd sent the measured message during the crisis, called a few days later. She said she'd heard the full story now. About the chair, about what my aunt had said. She admitted she hadn't known I'd been paying for Thanksgiving. My aunt had never mentioned it. She said what happened to me wasn't right. She got that now. But she asked if I thought my response was proportionate. Leaving everyone with that bill, causing that whole scene. Wasn't that a bit much? I asked her if she'd checked on me while I was sitting outside. She said she hadn't realized I was out there. I asked her if she'd heard my cousins laughing about it. She admitted she had, but she'd thought it was just a joke. She hadn't understood the context. I told her the context was that I'd been treated like I didn't matter, like I wasn't worth basic decency. And when I stopped providing what they wanted, suddenly it was a problem. She was quiet for a while. Then she said she thought maybe everyone needed some space from each other. I agreed. Update 3. It's been 3 weeks now. The family group chat has gone silent. My aunt hasn't contacted me again after that email. I heard through another cousin that she and her boyfriend broke up. He'd apparently done some digging and found out about all the financial help I'd provided over the years, and he'd questioned what else she'd been dishonest about. Thanksgiving is apparently now referred to as the incident in family circles. 2 of my cousins reached out separately to apologize. Real apologies, not the kind where they try to justify what happened. They said they'd been caught up in the moment, following my aunt's lead, and they hadn't stopped to think about how messed up it all was. One of them admitted she'd always thought my aunt was a bit much, but hadn't wanted to rock the boat. Now she was rethinking a lot of family dynamics. The cousin who laughed the loudest hasn't said a word to me. My aunt posted something on social media about the holidays being a time for grace and forgiveness, with some quote about family being forever. Several people commented with supportive messages. I didn't engage. Someone who'd apparently heard the full story commented asking if grace applied to people who were seated in garages, but she deleted that comment pretty quickly. I'm not angry anymore, mostly. I'm just tired. I spent years showing up for people who saw me as a resource, not a person. The money was bad enough, but I could have lived with that. It was the chair that did it. The physical manifestation of exactly how little I mattered. Someone asked me if I regret what I did. Walking out, leaving them with that bill, watching it all fall apart. I don't. I regret that it took me that long to understand my worth. I regret all the times I made myself smaller so they could be comfortable. I regret believing that if I just gave enough, helped enough, showed up enough, I'd eventually be seen as real family. But walking out that day, handing that bill back to them, that's the first thing in years I don't regret. I'll have Thanksgiving at my apartment next year. Maybe I'll invite some friends. Maybe I'll volunteer somewhere. Maybe I'll sit alone and eat a good meal and be grateful for the peace. But I won't be sitting in anyone's garage, and I won't be paying for the privilege of being treated like I don't belong. That's worth more than $4,300. That's worth everything.